You wake up in the year 1900, you're 30 years old, and you remember everything. The world wars, the Great Depression, the moon landing, the internet, Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, everything. At first, it feels like you've won. If you know the future, couldn't you become the richest person in history? Couldn't you buy the right land, the right companies, make all the right investments? Couldn't you stop disasters before they happen? Maybe, but there's a problem nobody talks about. The more accurate your predictions become, the more dangerous you look. Because eventually, people stop asking what you know and start asking how you know it. And that's where things begin to go wrong. The first thing you do is survive, because 1900 isn't the world people imagine. There's no internet, no antibiotics, no air conditioning, no supermarkets. Even a minor infection can become a death sentence. For the first few weeks, changing history isn't your priority. Staying alive is. And that's when you discover something important. The future isn't valuable because it contains technology. It's valuable because it contains timing. You already know which industries will dominate, which cities will grow, which companies will transform the world. So, you start quietly. You buy land. Not in famous places, in forgotten places. Land near future rail routes. Land near expanding cities. Property that looks worthless today, but won't look worthless tomorrow. People call you lucky. You encourage them to believe that, because luck is easier to explain than the truth. Years pass. Your investments multiply. You buy oil before the oil boom, automobiles before they replace horses, electricity before it reaches every home. By 1910, you're wealthy. By 1912, you're one of the richest men in your state. And by 1914, people start noticing something strange. You never seem to be wrong. At first, it's a compliment. Then it becomes a question. How did you know? You hear it at dinners, business meetings, bank offices, newspaper interviews. How did you know? You always laugh, always change the subject, always move on. But every year the question becomes harder to avoid. Then comes your first real test, World War I. You know it's coming. You know millions will die. And suddenly, making money feels meaningless. Because if you know the future, don't you have a responsibility to do something? So you try. You write letters, contact politicians, speak with newspaper editors, warn anyone willing to listen. Nobody listens. Why would they? If someone today claimed to know events from the year 2150, would you believe them? Of course not. And that's the problem. Knowing the truth isn't the same as proving it. Then the war begins, exactly as you predicted. The headlines appear, the armies mobilize, the casualty numbers rise, and for the first time, people become uncomfortable. Because some of them remember your warnings. The same people who once called you lucky now have a different explanation. Maybe you're connected. Maybe you're a spy. Maybe you're hiding something. For the first time, your knowledge attracts suspicion. And suspicion spreads faster than facts. The war ends. Millions are dead. The world moves on. But the questions don't. In fact, they become louder. Because your predictions keep coming true. An election, a merger, a market trend. A failed business, a successful one, again and again and again. One afternoon, a banker closes the door to his office and asks a simple question. Not, what do you know? How do you know? The room suddenly feels smaller because you realize something. You have spent years preparing for future events, but you've never prepared for that question, and you don't have an answer. At least, not one anyone would believe. Then another disaster approaches, the Great Depression. Everyone around you is optimistic. Stocks are soaring. Businesses are expanding. People believe prosperity will last forever. You know it won't. Once again, you're forced to choose. Warn people or protect yourself. This time you stay quiet. You sell your holdings. Months before the crash. Friends think you've lost confidence. Business partners think you've become paranoid. Newspapers speculate about your decisions. Then October arrives and the market collapses. Millions lose everything. Savings vanish. Businesses disappear. Entire fortunes are erased. And once again, you survive. But survival comes at a cost, because now people are watching you closely. A few journalists begin investigating your history. Government officials request meetings. Competitors hire people to study your investments. Some believe you're a financial genius. Others think you're manipulating events. A few believe something much stranger. Your success has become too consistent, too precise, too impossible. By the mid-1930s, you are no longer famous for being rich. You're famous for never being wrong. And that's far more dangerous, because wealth attracts admiration, but certainty attracts fear. Then comes the burden you've dreaded most. Another war, a larger one, a deadlier one. World War II. You know about Hitler, you know about Pearl Harbor, you know about the Holocaust, you know about the atomic bomb, you know millions are going to die. And once again, you try. And once again, history refuses to cooperate, because history isn't controlled by one decision, or one leader, or one warning. It's billions of choices made by millions of people. And for the first time, you confront a painful truth. Knowing the future does not make you powerful. It only makes you aware. You can see the storm, but you still can't stop the rain. By the time you're old, the future has finally caught up with you. The airplanes arrived, the automobiles arrived, the skyscrapers arrived, the computers arrived. Everything happened almost exactly as you remembered. And for the first time in decades, there are no more secrets left, no more predictions, no more advantages, no more future. One evening, you sit alone watching the sun disappear beyond the horizon. And you think about the life you lived. You became richer than you ever imagined, more powerful than you ever intended. You predicted crashes, wars, elections, technological revolutions, entire decades. Yet the question that followed you for 60 years still remains. Was it worth it? Because the truth is, future knowledge gave you everything people dream about: money, power, influence. But it also took something away. You could never be surprised. You could never truly share your burden. You could never explain what you knew. Every disaster happened twice, first in your memory, then in reality. You watched wars before they began. You mourned tragedies years before anyone else knew they existed. And no matter how many times you warned people, history kept moving forward. In the end, the greatest illusion was believing that knowing the future meant controlling it. It didn't. The future was never a cheat code. It was a weight. A lifetime of carrying answers nobody would believe. And as the last pieces of your remembered future become the present, you finally understand the real cost of knowing tomorrow. It wasn't the responsibility. It wasn't the loneliness. It wasn't even the helplessness. It was spending an entire lifetime knowing exactly what was coming and still being unable to change the things that mattered most. But maybe you see it differently. If you woke up in the year 1900 tomorrow with everything you know right now, what would be the very first thing you'd do? Would you focus on becoming rich? Would you try to prevent wars and disasters? Or would you spend your entire life trying to convince people you weren't insane? I'm genuinely curious. Tell me your answer in the comments. And here's an even harder question. If you knew the future, would you actually want to? If you enjoy these alternate history scenarios, subscribe for more stories exploring impossible choices, forgotten opportunities, and the futures that could have been.